Did you know that the majority of data breaches happen while your data is being used, and not just while it's being stored? Imagine your most sensitive information exposed at the very moment it's most valuable. Scary, right? But don't worry, because today we have an expert who's here to unravel these complexities. I'm so excited that on today's episode, we have Purandar Das, who is the co founder and chief technology officer of Sotero. And Sotero is a Boston based cybersecurity company, and they are revolutionizing data protection by keeping data encrypted even while it's in use. So tune in and let's learn something about data security today. Welcome to Barely Legal in Web3. I'm Jamelia Greer, founder and CEO of ByteBow, and your guide through the uncharted territories of blockchain and digital innovation. Each Thursday, we're dissecting the most pressing legal and ethical challenges in the Web3 space. Whether you're shaping policy, advising clients, or leading innovation, this is your essential resource for navigating the future of law and technology. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts. Today, I am joined by Purandar Das, who is co-founder and CTO of Sotero. Purandar, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamelia. I appreciate you having me on your show.
Absolutely. And I know when we first spoke, we had sort of a nerding out session talking about data security. But for those of the listeners that don't know what Sotero does and what it's all about, can you please give us a brief introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you again. So Sotero is a Boston-based cybersecurity company. We are in the space of data security or data protection. Our unique calling card is a few different things. One is we provide a single platform to protect data in any of its forms, which has been a challenge in the industry, right? We want to provide a single solution for all data protection. And our data protection uniqueness is built on a couple of unique capabilities, patented and unique capabilities. One is the ability to keep data encrypted while it's in use. And that kind of elevates the level of data protection from data protection at rest to data protection in use. The other key thing is real-time threat detection and prevention. We have the unique capabilities to detect the threats across a wide range of areas. That range is anywhere from insider threat all the way down to ransomware protection. We not only detect it in real time, we also prevent, stop, and protect the data asset in real time as well.
Very interesting. And, for those people who may not be so well versed in data security, I want to kind of pick apart what you said about data being encrypted while it's in use. The general myth is that all data security services and products are the same. And what you've described is slightly different than what most products offer. And so can you tell us a little bit about what is the difference between when data is encrypted while it's in use versus traditionally, at least as I understand it, as data is, whether it's seen to be a leak or data can be vulnerable, then that encryption stops. So what is the difference there?
Great question. Let me give you some context in that, Jamelia. So historically, data protection products have relied on encryption. There's nothing new about it, right? Encryption has been around forever. Everybody claims they use it. Everybody actually uses it. What people don't realize or don't want to acknowledge is that encryption is limited to protecting data while it's at rest, right? Sounds like a great technical term, but keep this in mind. Data, if it's not accessible and being used, is essentially useless to the company or the process, the company, the entity that's storing, right? So therein lies the challenge. You want to protect data, you encrypt it, but encrypted data doesn't let you use the data. So now you're kind of saying, my data is protected only partially when no one's using it. Nobody has data that they don't use. So when the data is being used, it's actually being staged in plain text so that the queries, the processes, or the users can access and use it. At the moment you do that, you've lost the protection that's provided by encryption. So any data in use, for the most part, is vulnerable. And I'm sure you're aware, that you listeners are aware, that most data is not stolen while it's sitting at rest on a disk. It's stolen while it's being used. So legacy data products or encryption products don't actually protect data while it's being used, or they don't actually address the biggest challenge that data faces, keeping data protected while it's being made available for use. That's where we come in, and that's been our approach from day one, is how do you enable data protection without becoming an obstacle for business? And that's the problem that we've solved.
You're basically saying it's a balance between wanting to protect the data, but then wanting to use it while it's being protected so that you're still able to run your business and operate as normal.
Very simple example. If you think about data in a database, right, which most everybody can relate to, the data in a database, there are products out there that claim they protect or encrypt data in a database. They do when queries or users are not accessing and using the data. When a query or a user wants access to data, essentially the data is staged in plain text or unencrypted form. So there's no protection. We enable queries to run on encrypted attributes without the data being decrypted, meaning we elevate the level of protection from data protection at rest to data protection in use.
So for a company, let's say like Meta, for example, and yesterday Meta had a $1.4 billion fine from the Texas Attorney General. They were essentially using this tag suggestion capability. And by that, basically on Facebook, if I upload a photo of you and I sitting together talking, it will look at your face. It will basically scan the biometric data of your face and suggest, oh, is this Purandar Das? And it would know because of other photos of you that this is you. And so in that situation, that data is constantly in use because when anyone uploads a photo, they actually need to kind of pull on that data, I would assume, to be able to analyze whether or not this is a match and who we should suggest, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I guess in that situation, if it's not encrypted while it's in use, it's at risk.
It absolutely is. And I mean, so your perspective is from a user's perspective, why they need to keep the data available, right? Think about Meta's perspective of how many ads they serve up based on the same information. So think about think about how useless data protection at rest or encryption of that data at rest is, because the data is never not in use, or most likely never not in use. So absolutely, keeping the data encrypted while systems, users, and processes are accessing and using it is critical, so that you remove that vulnerability of the data being accessible by unauthorized user, by a criminal, by a hacker, etc. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, most people think in terms of a consumer. So I'm thinking in terms of a user. What is the risk to me is I'm giving my photos, but the flip side of that is what are the downsides for the business? If their whole business is to be able to access this data and run, it's a cost.
Exactly. I mean, you just brought up one company, right? Meta. Think about all the others that are out there that actually build businesses on consumer data or consumer information. And think about how much exposure there is to consumer data, consumer privacy, because of the companies collecting it. I mean, we've all benefited from these companies in many ways, right? Because of the services, the capabilities, the technologies, the products that they brought to the market. But by the same token, they've also created a massive exposure to our privacy and to our security.
And speaking of exposures, there's a second part to that equation, which is the ransomware threats and really being able to monitor threats. And is there some element of predictability to that? Can you kind of walk us through that piece again? Because in my experience working at Standard Chartered, there's ransomware and there's threats that come through, and there are some potential ways that institutions can predict that. But I think what you're talking about is a little bit more advanced.
Yeah. So if you really go back in time, think and start to think about the evolution of ransomware, right? Ransomware is I mean, it's widespread today and a real threat to everybody on the planet, right? Whether you have a couple of $1,000s in savings or you have millions of dollars or billions of dollars, it's all over the place and it's a real threat. But historically, it actually started of holding individual consumers ransom, right? The old malware, the adware, the malware where they would encrypt laptops and say, well, you owe us $50. and we won't let you use the machine, or we won't decrypt the machine if you don't give us the $50. But then they realized that there was much more opportunity in holding large corporations at ransom, right? And even the first phase of this didn't actually affect the information at all. They said, we'll just make your systems inaccessible or inoperable, right? Interchangeably the same thing, and pay us money so you can recover the thing, which is they started. But a couple of things happened there. One is they kind of blew up so much in scale that they couldn't even hold themselves to their own commitment of making the systems operable again, because the encryption keys wouldn't work and they didn't know what they had done because the systems were so widespread and rampant. They would essentially destroy a company's business, right? They realized so the backups and all that came in, companies would struggle to recover. They'd be out of action for a while. It managed to come back, lose some revenue and stuff. The attackers then discovered something else. Hey, we're more of a nuisance than a real threat. What is more profitable than this? Why don't we go after what actually drives the business? What drives the company's business? It's data. And so why don't we go in there, get a copy of their data, get a hold of their data, and tell them, you either pay us to get back the data, or we're going to put it into the wild, right? The put it into the wild has serious connotations for consumers and individuals all over the world. It could be health, medical information. It could be financial information. It could be really sensitive information that belongs to a consumer. So now, not only are they threatening to put consumers' lives at risk, they're also holding companies at a hostage, because they know most companies have no option but to pay them to recover the data. So that's the real aspect of where ransomware has become a threat, more as opposed to a nuisance that it used to be when it started off.
Right. And, these sorts of things are very real. I mean, I recall in my time at Marriott, there was the threat in the leak, actually was a hack at that time, of having the data being accessed. This was several years ago, passport information of millions of Marriott guests was accessed and taken and copied as well. And so data is currency now. And I think that that's something that we really need to start, saying it again. If you have a tech business, and even for businesses who are not tech, even for retail businesses, the way that you contact, engage your customers, understand who your customers are, all of that data is currency. And so being able to predict if there's any sort of risk is actually, that's more than valuable than most businesses can really quantify.
Absolutely. And what is also happening, many of the new businesses, right, operate in real time, meaning that they're accessing information, collecting information, and making decisions in real time. That is based on a simple example of where a consumer is at a certain point in time, what they're doing at a certain point in time, where they may not be at a certain point in time. As much as this information is critical to make decisions in real time, it also exposes a real threat to the consumer in real time. Because somebody that has access to the information can figure out where an individual is and what they're doing at any point in time. That exposes them to a variety of threats that didn't exist before.
I kind of want to nerd out a little bit. I've been, with ByteBow, we are putting together this course called Barely Blockchain to teach lawyers about technology, particularly Web3 and blockchain technology. And in thinking about the concept of decentralized information rather than centralized information, what I've learned in sort of reviewing and pulling all of this material together is that the threat, it still exists. It's actually in a different format when the information and the data is more decentralized. Of course, if you're going to one source, obviously, it's there. I think there is this myth or misconception that everything in the blockchain space is safe and it's free from hacks or threats. Because it's decentralized, we're all okay. Can you talk a little bit more, I guess just from the technical side, about why that is not necessarily true?
Absolutely. So it's another example. Jimmy, what you just painted out, relates to many different misconceptions, right? And many different mistakes that have been made in the past, and not mistakes necessarily because that was the architecture and that's how security and privacy products were built. Right, with the emergence of blockchain, for example, I think one of the early selling points that was oversold and is not true is that blockchain is safe. Blockchain is immutable, meaning that anything done on the blockchain, it can be audited, tracked back, and identified. There's nothing in there that says it's actually safe. Right? You have an audit trail back to track whatever you want, but there's nothing in there that makes it any safer than any other system today. The data is encrypted at rest. We just spoke about it. That doesn't make the data not accessible while it's being used. The transactions between different points is the same thing. You can eavesdrop on things, you can intercept transactions, and you can piggyback on conversations, etc. There's nothing in there that makes it safe. To the decentralized aspect of it, that's where the world is going. There's just way too much data being collected that makes it impractical to kind of consolidate everything back to a single source, operate on it, and then push out results or analyses, right? You need to be able to act at the point that you collect information, right? And you need to protect the point that is collecting that information. That leads us back to the same challenges that we have with systems today. They were built with saying, let's try to keep people out of the data, right? And that should be enough. That's not enough because the networks, the environments are so complex that it's impossible, as we're finding out in everyday headlines, to identify every access point and shut it down. Right? You need to have another layer of defense or security that actually protects the data, whether it's centralized, decentralized as on a blockchain. It's the same challenge. You need to be able to protect the data. You need to be able to detect a threat in real time on the data asset and be able to shut down the data and also make the data inaccessible for somebody that's trying to steal. The problem is the same. The scale is much larger because in a decentralized network, it could have hundreds of thousands of nodes, right? So you have the same problem magnified to a much larger extent. Just protecting the single source that collects all this information is not sufficient because the data is also available at all of the different points.
Yes, it's actually a worse nightmare than what we could even imagine in that decentralized format. It is spread out. The risk is spread out and somewhat omnipresent in a way.
Absolutely. And think about this too, Jamelia. The ownership of those different nodes on a blockchain or in a distributed environment is not under anyone's control. There are different individuals that have control of these things. So absolutely, the problem is much more bigger than people even imagine.
Yes, and as you talk about this, as we talk about the risk and the ability to sort of penetrate blockchain data, and we look on the past 2-3 years where we've seen a number of events that have happened where there have been hacks in certain platforms and large amounts of money have been siphoned off. A lot of it has been really just been the technology. People have, painted all of cryptocurrency with a bad brush, that it's bad, but really it's structurally blockchain technology has this inherent risk that we are still looking to solve and to address from a data security standpoint.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if anybody's skeptical about what the topics that we're discussing, all you have to do is look at the daily headlines, right? Whether you look at a large corporation that's been hacked or large corporations that have been hacked and all of the cryptocurrency, some money siphoning that has happened, it's pretty obvious that the problem exists on both sides of it. So, yeah, absolutely.
One more thing I want to kind of touch upon before we go and talk about space and time is that, you talked about entry points where data is first collected. And I'm thinking structurally in terms of like infrastructure, where, a company or a startup, they say, okay, we want to build this particular app or this system or an Oracle, what have you. And they're first setting up. Is that the time where they should start looking into their data security systems and how they're going to protect their data in the future? Or is it really later on after they have realized what their data flows are going to be like that they should start thinking about a data security product or service?
You bring up a really valuable and important perspective on this, Jamelia. We spoke about the many different businesses that have come up and how they're changing the world for everybody, for the good, for the most part, right? But if you think about what their primary focus of those platforms, the products, the technology was, it was actually capabilities and features. They then went back and said, we need to think about privacy too, because we're collecting data. That happened after they designed their products and stuff, because the primary driver in any company is saying, just get the system up, just get the product up, build this feature, because we have revenue that we are counting on these features and capabilities are going to bring. So absolutely, yes. I mean, in my opinion, like there isn't a point in time to start thinking about privacy and security. It needs to be a part of your thought process every day. Whether you're thinking about existing platforms, you're thinking about a new platform, new product. But if it's in the case of a new product, absolutely you start with privacy and security, because as we're seeing, the loss of privacy and security can pose an existential threat to the business, just as loss of revenue would. So that's how important privacy and security is, in my
opinion. I think that has to be said twice, because as a lawyer, I mean, one of the things that we're always saying is bring legal in early, all of these risk silos and risk compartments that have to be addressed early on when you're building a business, when you're in, the startup phase and you're thinking about who your customers are, where you're going to meet your customers and everything. You have to think about, as soon as you get that first, 100 customers, you're collecting data. You're in the data business. As soon as exactly. That happens, you're in the data business. You got to get your ducks in a row.
I'll give you both perspectives of this, right? Because of my background. From an application or a product perspective, they're under tremendous pressure, and their desire, for the most part, is to build capabilities, features, functionality, whatever you want to call it, that drives the company. Then you think about security. They go to bed not being able to sleep because they're worried about what happens if they have a single breach. Right. So bringing that thought process into the product earlier actually makes it easier to implement and maintain that, as opposed to the security and the privacy teams coming on later and saying, hey, you haven't done this. Then the push becomes, we can't do that because that's going to slow down the process. That's going to create friction for the consumer. That's going to introduce obstacles for them to convert. Well, I mean, yeah, okay, you get them to convert, you have a breach, you won't have a business. So bring them in earlier, make them be a part of the process so that you can actually account for the friction, the latency, and all that stuff into the process from day.
Well, what will really slow down the business is getting a call from the regulators saying, we heard that there was a breach.
Yeah, exactly.
And that there have been millions of data leaked. And that's a call that you never want to get. And I've gotten that call, and it is certainly not fun. But I wanted to move on and talk a bit about your work that you're doing with Space and Time, Sotero's work with Space and Time. Can you tell us a bit about that and what it entails?
Absolutely. We're very proud of our partnership with Space and Time. Space and Time is a startup or a company out of California. They are the first company to build a decentralized data warehouse on blockchain. So if you think about that, it's the next generation or the next evolution of data warehousing, leveraging all of the positive capabilities of being on a blockchain. So you have distributed nodes. You don't need to move data around. You can scale the nodes as much as you want, and you get instant results across the entire chain. You can have on-chain nodes, which are built into the blockchain, and you have off-chain nodes, meaning that you have data sources that are not part of it, but can now be made a part of the chain so that you can run analysis, queries, business functionality across multiple nodes, millions, hundreds of thousands, or millions of nodes without losing efficiency or capability. To our point of what we just discussed, one of the first things they said was we need to make our offering our platform secure. And secure means a bunch of different things, right? We need to make it secure all the way from being able to leverage the capabilities of blockchain, which is immutable thing, and auditability. So they built a patented capability called proof of SQL that can validate that every SQL submitted anywhere on the node and running on any of the nodes is the same SQL that was submitted and that was executed, generating the results, right? That's part of the thing. Then our partnership is where we come in to make sure that the data is never tampered with, never exposed, and there's no risk to it. we are embedded in the platform to make sure that the data collected at each one of the nodes stays encrypted throughout its life cycle. So it's a great partnership where they build where they're building the next generation data warehousing, decentralized data warehousing, and we are providing the security capabilities and the threat detection to eliminate any threat to the data anywhere on the chain.
Do you see this sort of decentralized data warehousing being something that's going to become, definitely much more needed in the future with AI and these large language models and all of the data that we're processing, collecting, and everything? I mean, it seems as though we're moving towards a state where we've got to put this data somewhere. I I have no idea how it's going to look, but that certainly is a concern.
Fantastic reference there to large language models, right? I mean, That's think about the volume of data that some of these models utilize, right? Think about how impractical it is for everybody to become an open AI and collect all this information and keep it updated, right? And the sheer magnitude of the task itself is scary, and it's not going to work forever, right? You throw onto the fact to that what we discussed earlier about the volume of data that's being generated by the many applications and the many platforms. It's physically going to be impossible to collect all this information, move the data, run analytics on it, and then push the results back out. So that's where leaving data at the edge, collecting data at the edge becomes critical. Securing at the edge, securing data where it's collected becomes paramount. Then when you throw on a blockchain, now you have a platform that's capable of leaving data where it's collected, enabling analytics, analysis, queries to run on the data it's collected in the fashion that it needs to be run. So you have the capabilities to draw conclusions, quote unquote, an AI platform that is secure but doesn't need data to be moved all over the place. Absolutely. AI is going to accelerate that need and that requirement. Absolutely.
Do you think that there will be sort of an increase in price? I mean, it sounds as though as this need for data warehousing in this kind of way, in this broad way, whether it's decentralized or not, but just data hygiene, data security, all of these data things. Do you see the price increasing as people start to innovate more and more?
Yeah, I think it's going to follow the same curve that most new technology. Referring to AI or LLMs as new technology is underselling it dramatically. But in the context of this thing, I think it'll work out because most new technology that's groundbreaking when it comes in is very expensive, right? Because the challenges associated with skills and technologies and platform and resources, etc. I think we're going to see the peak, and then it starts to decline, where some of the components of this capability is going to be commoditized, and that it'll stabilize at some point in the future. But I think in the near term, we're going to see it become more expensive.
I think at least the soon to be commoditized is good news for some of our entrepreneurs who are listening and thinking about what they're going to do with their data security issues upon hearing this news. And speaking of that, we always like to educate our listeners as we wrap up conversations. If there were 1 or 2 points you wanted to leave with someone who is, just starting a tech business, because many of our listeners are in the tech space and starting tech businesses, what would it be with respect to data security?
I mean, start thinking about data security the moment you think about your technology, whether it's a product, a platform, or offering, or capability that you're thinking. Right. Think about it from this context, not so much about what solution you're going to use. Think about what loss of privacy, loss of security is going to mean to you in an adverse way if it were to happen to your business. Is it going to put you out of business, right? Or is it going to be just an incidental thing? Do you not have to worry about it? Which nobody's not going to have to worry about it. Everybody will. If you think about it early enough, right, implementing it, maintaining it, is easier, and it's a lot less expensive than having to react it because a customer came and told you that your system is at risk, or you caused them some kind of a privacy issue or a security issue. When you scramble around, think about all the impacts that you're going to have. Your insurance is going to go up. You're going to be under scrutiny. You're going to lose customers, and you're going to scramble around trying to slap on some technology that may not be the best. So that risk continues to propagate and live with you for a long time if you have to scramble and react to it, as opposed to saying, let me think about it from day one. It could just be we're storing usernames and passwords or like a customer profile. It's a very simple problem to solve. Solve it on day one.
And that reputational risk that you mentioned is something that a lot of people don't account for. They're thinking, okay, dollars and cents, your reputation is, damaged by a data leak. Then when you go for your next business and you go to raise funding, that follows you.
Absolutely.
You're the person in the room that has,
we're not very far away from investors asking you when you go with a business plan of convincing them that you're going to build a secure and privacy enabled product, right? Because think about the risk it causes to them. Think about the risk that it involves in terms of elevated, escalated, or maybe not even being covered from a cyber insurance perspective. When you pull all this together, that poses an existential threat, even as you're thinking about the product, because all of these folks, all of these constituents are impacted by the fact that you didn't think through privacy and security. We're not far away from that day.
Absolutely. And, upon having this conversation, I've got a whole new perspective on data security that we will be talking about on Barely Legal in Web3. And Purandar, I guess, one of the things I kind of like to close out with is what is next for Sotero? What is on the horizon? And what is it that you are most excited about?
So, for us, the fact that we are one of the first companies in the market to provide one platform for organizations to achieve data protection, meaningful and effective data protection is very exciting. When I talk to our prospects and customers, they talk to me about the 15, 17 different products that they have to deploy to manage their data protection and security, knowing that there's still exposure, right? And the number of skills, the resources that they're throwing on products, because that's what they built. Enabling them to become more efficient and truly achieve data protection is exciting. There is a long ways to go for us to get this platform out there and help companies. So that's our goal in the thing. Then you throw LLMs or AI on top of it. That's introduced another big challenge for us to approach, right? And we're doing that. And when you think about LLMs, we discussed data protection for LLMs, which for us, from our perspective, data is data, whether it's in an LLM or in a legacy database, right? Or in a file system somewhere. Find a way to identify what's in the data, identify the risk, right? And then enable protection of the data and privacy enablement without impacting the business process. That's our primary goal. What LLMs have thrown into the mix is the volume of data for one, right? That is just monumentally exponential. The second thing that it threw up there is copyright protection, which really wasn't that big of an issue with data and other sources. LLMs now pose a copyright challenge for not just data that's being consumed from there, where you inadvertently infringe on somebody's copyright because the data is in there and nobody told you that it's copyrighted. It also poses a challenge for data that you're throwing into the LLM because you could be throwing confidential and copyright protected information in the LLM that somebody else could get access to. So that is part of what we're solving right now. Is saying the data protection is one thing, the scale is a challenge. How do we approach and enable companies and individuals to interact bidirectionally with LLMs and achieve protection from copyright infringement?
That is a whole podcast in itself, the whole intellectual property rights and, this data that LLMs are sort of consuming and using and leveraging that may or may not belong to them, or they may or may not have rights to. Certainly a very interesting challenge there to have to solve, but I think that you and your team are well placed to do it. And I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. It truly has been a conversation that for me is enlightening and then also quite enjoyable to go deep into how data security actually works and what makes Sotero different. So I thank you for that.
Julia, thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. The interaction is fantastic. Getting your perspective, especially from a consumer perspective and a legal perspective, so valuable because we put our heads down as technologists and product people and focus on how do we solve a problem, but getting that perspective is invaluable to help us build a better platform and a more effective product. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Purandar Das from Sotero, thank you so much for joining us here today on Barely Legal and Web3. We'll see you next time, everyone. Thank you.
As we wrap up this episode, I want to take a moment to tell you about an exciting new program we've been working on, and also the reason why you haven't heard this podcast in a couple of weeks. The program is called Barely Blockchain. If you're a lawyer interested in staying ahead of the curve and learning about the latest in technology, especially Web3 and blockchain, this program is for you. So, this program is designed to teach lawyers about the fundamentals and practical applications of blockchain technology. You'll gain hands-on experience and insights that will help you understand and navigate the rapidly evolving tech landscape. So, whether you're looking to enhance your current practice, explore new career opportunities, or simply expand your knowledge, Barely Blockchain offers really valuable benefits. What separates this program apart from other courses is that we have an exciting Web3 legal clinic, which is the way that you will really learn and turn theory into practice. So through our partnerships with Animoca Brands and Open Campus, we're providing participants with hands-on experience in real-world projects. And this experience is designed to build your confidence and equip you with the skills needed to thrive as you advise clients. So don't miss this opportunity to stay ahead in the legal profession. To learn more and sign up, visit bytebow.io. And thank you for tuning in to Barely Legal and Web3. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you are subscribed wherever you're listening to it. And please rate it. I'd love to hear from you. And your support helps us bring you more insightful content. So until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of Web3 and emerging tech. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. You know, I appreciate when you guys tune in and the time that you take to listen to the show and support us. And I have one thing that I'd love for you to do that would really help us out, which is rate the show. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you rate it. You can do it on whatever platform you're listening on. That would do wonders for us. And if you really want to be a super fan and really support the show, there's a link below that you can support us and donate a small monthly contribution, which allows us to continue to create great content for you. Thanks so much again. Appreciate you and see you next time.